Sociological Conference of the Indian Sociological Society. This year's theme for the conference is Sociology, Development and Democracy. On behalf of BMU, we are delighted to host this event, bringing together a diverse group of delegates, including renowned sociologists, professors, early career scholars, practitioners, research scholars, and students. For the inaugural event, we are honored to have our chief guest, Ms. Urvashi Butalia, with us today. We are also joined by the President of the International Sociological Association, Professor Jeffrey Place. We also have with us Professor Maitri Chaudhary, President of Indian Sociological Society, and Professor Shweta Prasad, Secretary of the Indian Sociological Society. We are pleased to be joined by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Shyam Menon, and our Registrar, Dr. Suneet Soni. We also have with us Professor Arindam Banerjee, Dean, School of Liberal Studies. We are also accompanied by the organizing secretaries of the conference, Dr. Suchasmita Chattopadhyay and Dr. Manu Matthew. Without any further ado, let's start with the program. I would like to invite our Vice Chancellor, Professor Shyam Menon, to deliver the inaugural address.
Thank you, Vaishali. Good morning, Chief Guest, Ms. Urvashi Butalia. We forgot to clap her, so let's do it. President ISS, Professor Maitri Chaudhary. President ISA, Dr. Jeffrey Place. Secretary ISS, Professor Shweta Prasad. Treasurer ISS, Professor Prem Sagar Vivek. Dean, Professor Arindam Banerjee. Registrar, Dr. Suneet Soni. Organizing Secretaries, Dr. Manu Matthew and Dr. Suchasmita Chattopadhyay. Distinguished delegates, scholars, dear colleagues, my dear students, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure in welcoming all of you this wintry Sunday morning to the BML Munjal University campus and to the 49th All India Sociological Conference 2024. Yesterday was the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. And today on, the days are going to get longer. This is the Gregorian version of the beginning of Uttarayana. This can be likened to the darkest hour that precedes daybreak. This darkness is special. It holds the seed of light germinating in its womb. I take this as metaphorical of the energy, wisdom, and compassion that would eventually steer the world and humanity out of what many would consider a bleak moment in history that we find ourselves in. It's appropriate this year that the All India Sociological Conference is focusing its deliberations on the interface of sociology, development, and democracy. There cannot be a better vantage point than a university from where to look at the complex issues that underlie this triad, particularly those issues that stem from inequality. Universities are, after all, at the very apex of the educational edifice, which in an incredibly unequal society like ours, serves largely the function of sorting and selecting of young people for social positions that are stacked in a steep hierarchy. Although education has the potential to serve as a leveler in the context of extreme inequality like what we have in our society, it serves to reproduce structures of inequality and sometimes even to exacerbate it. BMU is privileged to host this year's All India Sociological Conference. It's heartening to find on our campus this large community of scholars, teachers, and researchers of sociology and allied disciplines from all over India and abroad. The decision to host such a large event on our campus was based essentially on the palpable enthusiasm on the part of the youngest of our schools of studies, the School of Liberal Studies. It is heartening to see the energy mobilized in the organization of this major event by the faculty and students of the School of Liberal Studies. What is equally heartening is the willingness and enthusiasm with which a large number of students and some faculty from other schools and programs have volunteered to participate in the organization of this event. It is also encouraging that other departments and divisions of the university have also come forward to support and manage the various aspects of the conduct of this event. As I mentioned earlier, the School of Liberal Studies is the youngest among our 4 schools of studies. The university began life in 2014 with our flagship programs in engineering and management. In consonance with the thrust on these flagship programs, BMU soon established an Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and with a government grant set up an Atal incubator. A research infrastructure was also created with particular focus on material sciences, electric mobility, artificial intelligence, and computational sciences. In 2019, BMU established its School of Law. The School of Liberal Studies came into existence only in 2023. Engineering as the initial focus of BMU is understandable. The promoters of this university, the Hero Industries, is predominantly an engineering-oriented group of companies. The group's founder, Dr. BML Munjal, after whom this university has been named, was amongst the first generation of entrepreneurs in the post-independence India. They had humble beginnings. Their focus was on the common people. Bicycle was their flagship product through which they became a household name in India. Bicycle touches common people's lives. It supports mobility, both spatial and social. It makes it possible for people to participate effectively in the growing economy. Bicycle is also a symbol of empowerment, particularly for women. It's an assertion of agency for the poor and the marginalized. Although the Hero Group has since grown beyond their initial product and become the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturers and innovators in areas like sustainable mobility, their core concerns still are quality coupled with humanism. Their orientation is that of keeping people as the central focus of their growth. The university was established in 2014 as a not-for-profit entity with a similar philosophy and vision. Its focus has been on social impact of nurturing entrepreneurial mindset and ethical leadership through an experiential learning curricula and pedagogy. BMU was not parachuted into this geographical terrain. It grew organically from this ground. The Hero Group always had laid emphasis on community engagement, particularly in these parts of rural Haryana. Flowing from this, the university's mission includes deepening and strengthening the organic linkages with the communities that constitute the university's ecosystem. This is sought to be accomplished through field immersion, translational research, and incubation of micro-entrepreneurs drawn from the communities surrounding the university. The university attempts to provide access to quality higher education for young people with potential located in social and economic margins. About 40% of the student population receive financial support by way of scholarships, bursaries, and fee waivers. BMU is still a small student community of less than 3,000 and is largely residential. The growth has been regulated and contained with the purpose of ensuring that quality is not compromised. We are trying to populate our faculty with the best and the brightest of scholars, many of whom have an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary training and expertise, and who also share our commitment to social impact and thought leadership. I thought it appropriate to introduce you to the institutional philosophy of BMU, essentially to demonstrate how the university's concerns and preoccupations are similar to some of your own as sociologists. Thus, we deem it an honor to be able to host this conference. We hope this is a prelude to a stronger association between us and you, BMU and the ISS and ISA. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege for me to inaugurate the AISC 2024. I wish the conference all success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Menon. I would now like to invite Professor Arindam Banerjee, Dean School of Liberal Studies, to deliver the welcome address.
Good morning and a warm welcome from the School of Liberal Studies to all delegates of the 49th All India Sociology Conference and all the dignitaries seated on the dais. We are living in a global and national context that is characterized by deep civilizational challenges and institutional metamorphosis today. While the digital revolution has shrunk the world and brought different cultures closer to each other, it has also significantly altered how human beings interact with each other. Conversational cultures and tolerance for diverse views that has been the bedrock of democratic societies are often giving way to the quest for fast and final solutions and the proliferation of harmful binaries. Fueled by consumerism, material aspirations have also increased the pressure to develop faster, even as societies have grown more unequal after decades of neoliberal economic policies. We're also living in an age of rapid technological change, with artificial intelligence increasingly influencing different spheres of our lives. Education and the creation of knowledge will potentially change in a radical manner with the deepening of AI. And all of this happening within the context of a climate crisis that threatens to present unknown challenges and adversely affect large sections of already marginalized population. In this context, we are looking at very real possibilities of complex and fundamental changes in social and political institutions, cultures and human behavior, the world of work and leisure, and the conditions of production and reproduction. The spirit of academic inquiry and the zeal to interrogate and comprehend the complex impact of the above challenges is perhaps no more important than now. The School of Liberal Studies at BMU has been engaging with these important questions through its teaching and research, approaching contemporary social challenges through a holistic, interdisciplinary lens, as well as a rethinking of pedagogy to learn organically from and with society and communities has been at the heart of our efforts. We endeavor to adopt an immersive pedagogy where we revisit the conventional binaries between the classroom and the field, integrating ethics, empathy, and compassion with knowledge creation remains an important cornerstone of our curriculum. The School of Liberal Studies has an ensemble of carefully chosen faculty with a wide breadth of experience in interdisciplinary research and teaching drawn from various disciplines like psychology, economics, sociology, education, philosophy, history. The research focus in the school is on interconnected areas, ranging from community transitions and environmental justice, children and youth, education and work, politics and political narratives, agrarian development and food systems, and archival and public history. The school hosts research centers like the Center for Child and Youth Transitions and the Communities Transition Research Center. The school is also launching a Center for Public Policy to delve into critical policy issues and developmental questions. Engaging and facilitating public discourse on contemporary questions has been of prime interest to the school. Towards this, we launched the SOLS Conversations, which has hosted panel discussions with leading intellectuals and practitioners like Ashok Vajpayee, Mrinal Pandey, Madhav Gadgil, Amitav Aviskar, Ashish Kothari, Nivedita Menon, and Don Norman, to name a few, on a wide range of questions concerning culture, language, environmental sustainability, academic freedom, pedagogy, and public policy. And hosting the 49th All India Sociology Conference is really an extension of that effort to further public discourse. In our short journey, we have also developed important collaborations in the area of psychology and culture with the Hans Killian and Kohler Institute, a center at the University of Bochum, Germany, and the Kakkar Center for Psychoanalysis and Culture. Some of the joint activities and lectures under these collaborations have witnessed an admirable global engagement. In this context, we are truly honored to host the 49th All India Sociological Conference in partnership with the Indian Sociological Society. It presents us with a unique and valuable learning opportunity, given the synergies between sociology and liberal arts. Both are embedded in shared interdisciplinary approaches. The interdisciplinary turn brought about by feminists to sociology in the 1970s has had lasting impacts on the ways sociologists inquire about the social worlds in which economic challenges, political and cultural contestations, and the local global dynamics manifest. To tackle 21st century problems and address them from a grounded approach, sociology offers critical epistemologies, methodologies, and toolkits to fully unpack the complexities of our times. A liberal arts education also seeks to prepare students to be critical problem solvers for the future. The range of research committee themes indicate the gamut and breadth of sociology's interdisciplinarity and offers scholars interested in making sense of contemporary issues a space to think, dwell, deliberate, and debate. With these words, I would once again like to welcome all of you to the conference and extend my best wishes to the organizing committee, our team of young volunteers, and the Indian Sociological Society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Banerjee. I would now like to call upon the organizing secretary of the 49th All India Sociological Conference, Dr. Suchismita Chattopadhyay, to address the audience.
Thank you, Vaishali. On behalf of Dr. Manu Matthew and I, we warmly welcome all of you to the 49th All India Sociological Conference. This year, we've had an unprecedented number of registrations, close to 1,500. And this is no mean feat and is remarkable for several reasons. And I repeat, 1,500. So at the very outset, it demonstrates the robustness of the discipline and the willingness of its students and practitioners to take forward the discussions that circumscribe our ideas of development and democracy. Sociology as a discipline has always been a productive space for questioning existing knowledge and asking uncomfortable questions to the state, the notions of an unfettered materialistic individual, and what constitutes an ideal model of development. With 4 plenary sessions debating development and democracy and focusing on the politics and sociology of the NCR region, 2 memorial lectures, 2 special panels, and 34 research committees covering the breadth and scope of sociology, we hope that the 49th All India Sociological Conference will become a site of rigorous academic inquiry, new methodologies, and critical pedagogy. The School of Liberal Studies, and we are hosting the AISE this time, the School of Liberal Studies, with its focus on immersive pedagogy and interdisciplinarity, becomes a fertile terrain to host and house these important conversations through the ISS and the AISE. Now, we have received participants from all over the country and outside. The 49th iteration of AISE is also a youthful one. We took a quick look at the profile of our participants, and we are happy to report that they include a sizable number of master's students and also, apart from the PhD scholars. Now, we are also a young school, barely 2 years old, and running on the steam of our first and second year undergraduate volunteers. They have been at the forefront of managing all the logistics, right from coordinating with the guests, with the managing committee members, with the research committee conveners, dealing with all kinds of contingencies in transport, registration, accommodation, and food. Now, Manu and I, we are very proud to have witnessed them grow up overnight and also extremely grateful for their support. The 49th AISC's organizing committee is indebted to the ISS for their constant support in terms of advice, morale boosting, and for giving us volunteers from the different universities of Delhi. I welcome them all, and I also thank them for the dexterity with which they have made the campus their own. Once again, we welcome all of you to the BML Munjal University and to the 49th All India Sociological Conference. Here's to 3 fruitful days of academic inquiry in the winter sun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suchismita. Now, I would like to invite our registrar, Dr. Suneet Soni, to felicitate our guests.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you all to the inaugural ceremony of the 49th All India Sociological Conference. This occasion brings together some of the most esteemed scholars and leaders in the field, and we are truly privileged to have you here today. As a gesture of our gratitude and goodwill, we would like to felicitate our distinguished guests. I now invite Professor Shyam Menon, Vice Chancellor, BMU, to kindly felicitate Padma Shri Urvashi Bhutalia. Thank you, Professor Menon. I request you to also felicitate Professor Geoffrey Plers, President of the International Sociological Association, for honoring us with his presence. Thank you. Next, I invite Professor Arindam Banerjee, Dean School of Liberal Studies, to felicitate Professor Maitri Chowdhury, President of the Indian Sociological Society. I request Professor Arindam Banerjee to felicitate Professor Shweta Prasad, Secretary of the Indian Sociological Society. Thank you. Let us extend a warm round of applause to all our honored guests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soni. I would now like to invite the President of Indian Sociological Society, Professor Maitri Chowdhury, to deliver the presidential address.
A very, very good morning to all of you here. And I know it's very cold, and but what we witnessed just now sort of inspires us. And I'm really excited that you're here. The hall is full, and I know there's another hall too. So on behalf of the Indian Sociological Society, it gives me great pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to you all at the inaugural of the 49th All India Sociological Conference at BML Munjal University, Gurugram, Haryana. I am delighted and thankful for your warm response and enthusiastic participation. Let me read it as a sign that sociology still matters in our times. And it matters precisely because of its constitutive relationship with development, democracy, and peace. That would be the basic contention of my address. We at the ISS are very happy that Professor Shyam Menon, the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Suneet Soni, the Registrar, Professor Arindam Banerjee, the Dean, Dr. Manu Matthew, and Dr. Sujismita Chattopadhyay, the organizing secretaries, are all here to share our joy. This has been a collaborative project, and I hope the beginnings of many more. Thank you. I know that there will be many, many occasions to thank, and I know that my colleagues, Professor Shweta Prasad, the Secretary of the ISS, shall do the needful. However, it is in order that I acknowledge the support of all those who has made the commencement of the conference possible. My gratitude to my colleagues in the ISS, the many members of the Indian Sociological Society, past presidents, past office bearers, colleagues, and of course the young scholars on whom the future of ISS rests. It has been a pleasure compounded that the President, ISS, Professor Geoffrey Pearce, and the Vice President, Professor Bandana Purkasta, are here today with us. I am really, really happy that we have none other than Urvashi Butalia as our chief guest, because for my generation, she represents somebody who combined both intellectual pursuits and institution building. You may not remember, Urvashi, I went to you shortly after my PhD when you had just begun your publishing endeavor, and we saw how that got built up. If you want to use contemporary language, built up as a global brand from the margins to speak a language which people were not familiar with. We at the ISS are trying exactly the same thing, a combination of intellectual pursuits, but which is not possible without institutional support and institutional rejuvenation. I am very excited with the address that Professor Menon said about the relationship between the university and professional associations like us, as well as certain kinds of visions which other kind of private institutions can offer us today as we face a kind of changing scenario. As I said just now, the enthusiastic response to the conference perhaps show that sociology still matters in our times. And further, I argue that sociology matters precisely because of this constitutive relationship with development and democracy. This is where I would like to begin, and this is the core contention of what I seek to address. And this is, as all students of sociology know, is where any textbook account of the growth and emergence of sociology begins. Every one of us who've done sociology, we know that we refer to those three great events, the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, and industrial capitalism, as the context within which sociology begins. Unfortunately, in a country where too often learning is rote learning, where too often definitional memorizing is the order of the day, we don't pursue that matter. Why do we begin with Enlightenment, democracy, and development? And it is here that I would therefore address all the three relationships. One, the emergence and nature of sociology, and the argument that the context defines what our perspective is. A central emphasis, again, in consonance with sociological perspective, is an emphasis on context. When we talk about knowledge, our knowledge is always context-specific. This becomes particularly important in our context today, where too often lay knowledge, common sense knowledge, unverified knowledge, knowledge which comes from just what we call knowledge by acquaintance, knowledge that we pick up in our family, neighborhood, and now WhatsApp as knowledge. Sociology has a particular specific orientation, the point which Arinda mentioned, a particular kind of epistemology, ontology, methodology. There is a theory which informs how we collect our data and information. So contexts are important. Contexts are important theoretically, therefore the whole question of science, whether you agree or disagree with it, but a particular method, whatever, even if it is an interpretative method, there has to be a method through which you gather your knowledge. Finally, the question that contexts change, contexts don't stay. And there could be a question that why on earth in 2024 in India, in Gurugram, why on earth are we talking about enlightenment or industrial capitalism or about the French Revolution, which is the textbook rendition? And the argument is that these three had impact on the way we were. So as industrial capitalism, we all know it, but it's important to reiterate, as industrial capitalism grew in the West, we were colonized. Our entry into modernity was mediated through colonialism. This is a story which has impinged upon sociologies of our parts, on Indian sociology. So a quick look at all the presidential addresses, a quick look at the writings in the bulletin, a quick look at our predecessors of whichever part of the country, you would notice that the angst of colonialism rested very, very strongly, and rested in two ways. It rested in the questions that they raised, whether it was poverty, immiserization, conditions of people, famine and plague. You read anyone, whether it is D.P. Mukherjee, whether it is Radhakamal Mukherjee, whether it is A.R. Desai, you read anyone and you will feel that. You will see similarly that they were concerned with knowledge construction and the argument that is the knowledge which has grown in the West relevant for us? And they had very nuanced understanding about what should be brought in, what should be rejected, what is universal and what is particular. They were informed pieces. It was not pure rhetoric. So young scholars here, young students, it's important to go back. It's important to go back and decide what remains relevant and what does not. Now, finally, the last part of my text is what I will address is how have context changed today in 2024, and it has already been addressed in some of the speeches which have been given before about the instant nature of knowledge production today, AI, mediatized knowledge. But let me go a little more systematically about the emergence and growth and nature of sociology, which I've already talked about, the questions issues which came about, the knowledge construction. Sociology thus emerged in a context marked by changing ideas of knowledge and its construction. Put differently, there is a specificity in the nature of sociology. There are, and everything I say here is obviously very, very abbreviated, two aspects about sociology and its way of understanding. One is a self-conscious engagement with theory, methodology, and techniques that orients us to understand the social. We do not take it for granted. The other is what I would say is the sociological consciousness, that certain core tenets or motives that one argues is a democratic consciousness. That will be the final part of my address, why I argue a sociological consciousness is necessarily a democratic consciousness. Then I move to sociology and development, and all of you are aware industrial capitalism altered the ways in which people lived, worked, and felt. Early sociologists sought to make sense of this transformation at both macro level and at micro level. Core theoretical debates about sociology were informed by competing visions of modernity and modern capitalist development. And the usual textbook rendition discusses functionalism and conflict theory, perhaps a distinction that hides more than it reveals, and perhaps it's time that we even go back and ask exactly, do they really capture the different alternative understandings of development? Empirically, if those were the theoretical questions, empirically we know that sociologists have always looked at questions of development. How does it impact how we work, what we work, migration, marriage, intimacy, gender, fertility, mortality, custom, norms. Developmental issues have been core to the sociological enterprise. Now we come to sociology and democracy. I've already referred to the French Revolution, and perhaps young people, at least when I was a young student, I always wondered, why on earth is the French Revolution sitting in my textbook? And the argument was that it transformed. If any of you read novels about that period, everything changed, as they say, and all that was solid melted. Everything was transformed. Nothing remained the same. And there was this instantaneous certain kind of motor of development. People started asking about the social order. So the entire debate about a conservative trend and a radical trend is constitutive of sociology. And it also empirically led us to ask questions about social mobility, inequality, power dynamics, and most importantly, the relationship between the individual and society. The writings of Indian sociologists have always addressed this relationship. I came to the university not in the early decades after independence, but when it had settled down more or less end of 1970s to JNU, where my teachers, whether it was Professor Yogendra Singh or Professor Oomen, they were engaging the question of nation building, diversity, inequality, the whole question of what kind of model of development should we pursue, the whole question of composite culture, how do communities in India live together? Because they came at a period after colonialism. Those issues were central in a particular way. I also want to go to a more global arena and remember that after the end of a brutal war, here we were colonized, so after 47, it was a different story, but it was also a period where the wars had ended. And the ISA here is interesting that after the devastating World War II, the process of founding the International Sociological Association was taken at the initiative of the Social Science Department of UNESCO, for sociology was seen as intrinsically promoting democracy. And I would like to very quickly quote from a Congress in 1986, the only time we had the World Congress in Delhi. And I quote, this was in Delhi, not too far away. From the presidential address, sociology is equipped to construct ways of dealing with two kinds of things, practical questions and questions of value, without jeopardizing the ideal of objectivity. But most importantly, the address says, contemporary sociology's objectivity does not entail neglecting or ignoring fundamental values, peace, solidarity, and equality of opportunity, which comprise the moral foundation of our actions as human beings. Today we live in fast-forward times, instant times, and too often moral foundations are reduced to a kind of 1, 2, 3, what values should you adopt? This is a more serious question, and we sociologists need to go back to the question of how are questions of values and moral questions linked to sociology. I come now to our times. We're talking about a past long ago. What about our contemporary times? How does the spirit of development do? What is the defining issue of contemporary times? I use two kinds of words. One is instant communication. The second, it's mediatized experience. Instant means we all know we get up in the morning, we see our WhatsApp messages, we want to communicate with our family members, nobody is listening, you send a WhatsApp message, they immediately respond. In our class, we really don't know what's happening because the telephone is omnipresent, and it is mediatized because people are connected only through the media. So what is real? As I say, we live not in real times, we live in real times. And I am, like any other person, have got hooked to reels because they are tempting, they are short, they are summaries, and even the reels can be abbreviated, and they capture your attention all the time. Academics is boring in that sense. And it's not this real times. There was a Microsoft study, and this also is almost 10 years ago in 2015, where they studied the average attention reduced from 12 seconds in 2000 to 8 seconds in 2013. The advertisers didn't know how to retain attention. Within a second, the attention would move. So advertisers were concerned. But the question that we ask as academics, how do you grab the attention of a person immediately and make them stay on your website? How do you do it? If advertising are finding it difficult, you can imagine the challenge the teacher finds to hold on to the interest of the students, So experience here is mediatized, and it leads to methodological questions that what we study, how does the media has transformed the social? We talked about industrial capitalism, we talked about French Revolution, we talked about democracy. But methodologically, our experience is not what it was. And this is, again, a challenge for the new scholars. How do we capture what is happening, what is true and what is not true? So this whole question of instantaneity, and I think Arindam mentioned about technology, has to be located in the context of two macro structures, macro processes. One, neoliberalism, and one, what I call the reign of managerialism. What is neoliberalism? We all use the word, but very briefly, it is not just a set of economic policies, not just a question of maximizing profits or challenging welfarism. It involves extending and disseminating market values to all institutions and social action, even as the market itself remains a distinctive player. Each of us is a product. Our CV is a product. I got a job without a CV. That was the times that we lived in. We have school children in class 4 who have CVs, And here we were the CV, So the whole transformation of selves and subjectivity has altered. If that is neoliberalism, very, very briefly, what is managerialism? There is no generally accepted definition of managerialism. It basically means that it is a certain set of expertise, theories, and techniques which applies to public and private institutions. There's this wonderful book, we know of Weber's Protestant Ethic and Spirit of Capitalism. There's another book about the new spirit of capitalism, which is managerialism. Now, what is managerialism? Very quickly, if we want to say, it's a central doctrine that the difference between organizations such as a university or a motor vehicle company, it's relevant here in Munjal, are less important than the similarities, and that the performance of all organizations can be optimized by the application of generic management skills and theory. So everything can be solved managerially. So if there is an issue of women's empowerment, I was just listening to a presentation the other day of Madhya Pradesh, where you have a new venture, Drone Didis, where you have the possibility of drones helping you in your farming. So the whole technological application, whether it is for women's security, women's empowerment, whether it is academic output or any kind of counting, it can be managed. It is, in other words, and I cannot develop this, an ideology, not just a technique. For things have sped up, markets shift faster, products evolve quicker, customers are more fleeting. This is the world we live in, extremely difficult because we are used to a time where we did academics slowly, very slowly, it didn't matter. We had anonymity, we had no Facebook, nobody knew us. There was the word of visibility and invisibility. We were invisible to the world, and I would think it was a good thing, because it's only in invisibility and anonymity that good work can take place. That does not mean that we don't engage with the public, but that engagement with the public is mediatized. That, however, has changed today. And not just now, it's just accelerated. Today, the whole buzzword is operationalization and application. Instant. So a poor student who's asked to write a term paper of 4 pages also has a last paragraph where she makes policy recommendations. Because this is demanded of her, that you have to provide certain kind of tangibles. This story of operationalism, of course, has a much longer history. And if you look at Herbert Marcuse's work, he makes this interesting observation that what had already got reduced, that how do you define or understand a phenomena? And the argument was, for example, and it takes the question of the concept of length. You don't understand what is length, but you know how to measure length. So the whole question of understanding being reduced to measurement, and therefore the plea that there's certain kind of engagement which has to take place with both democracy, development, and theory of knowledge. Finally, and I'll finish very quickly, I want to go back to certain motives of sociological consciousness and why I feel it's central to democratic consciousness. I borrow shamelessly from Berger's Invitation to Sociology, where he says there are certain kind of things, debunking. Nothing is respectable. You can question everything. There's a certain shamelessness about the important pursuit of knowledge. And you look through, you see through, you have a mistrust. You have an unmasking tendency. You don't accept appearance. Now, in a time when the world is mediatized and people take the appearance for what it is a challenge to social science. So people would say, we saw it. The camera took it. The video captured it. It changes the manner of experience totally. Of course, I've already mentioned unrespectability motive. It doesn't mean that we are rude. Very often it is reduced to personal behavior. When you say unrespectability is an intellectual question, you say why, you say how. you say what, and there are certain things which you look behind. It's a cosmopolitan motive, where the whole question of the universal is taken. And going back to the emergence of sociology, it emerged in a cosmopolitan context, unequal, exploitative, but cosmopolitan. And I think that is something, again, we need to go back. I will stop over here, and I know this conference will contribute to the development of sociology. We are meeting here as people one-to-one, and there will be formal presentations, but also a lot of informal engagement. Thank you once again. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chaudhary. I would now like to call upon the President of International Sociological Association, Professor Jeffrey Pless, to address the audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so glad and excited to be here, and I really would like to thank and congratulate the ISS President, Mitra Chanduri, and all the ISS team for this very promising Congress. And the BML Munjal University to host us. It is very fortunate, I'm very fortunate to be here to attend this Congress. 1,500 sociologists gathered here in India. Fantastic. And then to see all these brilliant people around, and just not fortunate to talk after such a dense and intense, insightful first talk by our President, Mitra Chanduri. But I think we share much of a perspective from the Indian and global perspective. Indeed, it's not casual. India has been a crucial actor in the ISA since the very foundation of the ISA. An Indian sociologist was an active member of the very first executive committee of the ISA. Govind Sadajiv Gorai, he was a very important actor of Indian sociology, but also a very important actor in founding the ISA. As Mehta here reminded us, India also hosted a crucial World Congress of Sociology here in Delhi in 1986, and T.K. Oman became the president of the ISA from 1990 to 1994. He was not only a very active president, he was also an inspiring president with major contributions on the internationalization of sociology. And then, of course, you all know Sujata Patel, who is a key actor for us in ISA. She was a vice president for publication and one of the most prominent authors and an indispensable voice of global sociology. Today, too, we are very fortunate to have Indian sociology all over in the ISA. I will mention some of them in my short address. India has been a crucial actor not only of the ISA, but also of global sociology. And I have to say that I discover every time I come back to India that many of the contemporary debates we have today in global sociology all over the world, well, and you already had it, and not recently, already in the 1920s, 1940s. Key questions for Indian sociology were the question that many sociologists are asking today around the world. How do we combine an indigenous sociology, local concepts, with also a global sociology? Nothing new for you, and it is something definitely we, at the international level, have to learn from you. This is actually what was at the core of the foundation of Indian sociology. And as the previous speaker said, this 49th All India Sociological Congress takes place in a period of time full of challenges for society, democracy, and sociology in India and in the world. So as we reach the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, societies face a whole new set of challenges, as you write in the Congress teams. And sociologists, well, we have reasons to worry and others to celebrate. I will share more in depth some reasons to celebrate tomorrow in the second plenary, but I would like to mention just briefly that our discipline is very lively. Not only, as you can see it here, to see so many sociologists together, but also because I believe that our discipline, sociology, has become much more lively, much more global, and much more open and able to transform itself since the beginning of the century. The sociology that I was taught at the end of the 20th century and sociology today, these are very different. And it is very different notably, I would say mainly, thanks to a global dialogue, where the global south is more present, and I would say thanks to the contributions of feminist scholars, intersectional approaches, subaltern, post, and decolonial studies, and the southern perspective and epistemology. This has deeply transformed sociology. I'm so glad that a sociologist that has contributed to this transformation, Professor Mehtai Chaudhuri, is presiding of the Congress today, and not only shows the importance and specificity of feminism in India, but also a plea for bridging the gap between academic research, sociology, and the public space. It's important also that it's not casual that you have chosen such a keynote speaker for this inaugural address. Urvashi Butalia, so important also in this perspective, and women and gender studies have been the forefront of the transformation of sociology over the first part of the 20th century. Today, gender and women's studies are also increasingly the forefront of a battle, not only for different sociology, but a battle for democracy, justice, and a fairer world. In ISA, we are very fortunate to have to count notably on our Vice President, Banana Bokachaya, who is over here, who is working on these topics in the US and in India. And our largest committee is also RC32, of which many of you are members, Women, Gender and Society. So seeing all these people around, and witnessing this large meeting, I can only be optimistic about the future, the current state, and the future of sociology. However, in this world, being sociologists, we also have reason to worry. We often feel powerless in front of the transformation of the public space that we already mentioned. A public space dominated by social media, in which it seems that any opinion, any fake news, matters as much or even more as a carefully conducted survey, or matter more as a result of a year-long research in social sciences. We feel powerless. Any kind of clone in the US posts a tweet and it has more impact than year-long research in sociology. Well, what should we do? First of all, and here again I take the word by the President, we have to remember that in this world sociology matters, and even more than before. We have the mission to train new generations of critical citizens able to deal with online information and disinformation. We have the duty to conduct rigorous analysis to understand our complex world, to unveil the shortcuts, lies, and fake news. We need to unveil also the power games and the ways actors seek to impose narratives that often lack any kind of historical, social, economic basement. And in this world, where billionaires are also social media savvy, we need to remind that the more powerful is not always right, and the narrative is not the truth. To quote a petition by 600 Swiss scholars who were afraid of the attack against gender studies. At the beginning of the century, we thought that the expansion of democracy was inexorable. A quarter century later, we live in a time where authoritarianism seems on the rise everywhere, in the global north and in the global south. This has obviously a direct impact on sociology and social sciences. We witness all over the world a multiplication of attacks on academic freedom, threats against sociologists in an increasing number of countries. These threats are even stronger in some crucial fields of our disciplines, such as gender studies. Our sociologists work with social movements, union, oppressed communities. Some threats are explicit. We receive at the ISA every couple of weeks an email by a sociologist has been targeted, has been fired by its university, has been jailed just for doing sociology and working with the actors, with oppressed actors, for denouncing a war, for denouncing a genocide. They get fired, they get jailed. But also, the threats are very often less visible, less explicit. In too many countries, we see sociologists who have to self-censor themselves. In too many countries, sociologists are not able to say, to diffuse, to disseminate the results of their research. In too many countries, actors from the government, from right-wing movements, try to frame sociology not as a science, but a matter of opinion. In too many countries, research funding has been cut for sociology, not for scientific, but for ideological reason. Well, this is a time to remember, to take the word of the ISA's president, that sociology matters in our time. And sometimes, when you feel it, you are attacked from every places. Then you may say that if we are attacked as sociologists, as a discipline, it is because, precisely because, sociology matters, and because a free, autonomous social sciences and sociology are intrinsic parts of democracy. Therefore, it is our duty to defend academic freedom for ourselves, but also for our students and for the new generation of students and researchers we are training. This is one of the reasons it is so important to gather for national and international congresses and to maintain a solid national and international association of sociology. Too often, we tend to forget, to take it for granted, that we have the ISS, we have the ISA, and many other organizations. These are crucial actors. These are crucial tools at the moment when we have to defend sociologists, promote sociologists, and as ISS does, promote a sociologist connected to people challenges, connected to people's daily life, connected to the global challenges too. We heard about inequalities, global warming, and many others. Well, sociology is crucial there, and we have to defend it in a world where it is attacked as a discipline in too many ways. And I would say that these associations, ISS, ISA, and many others, the national associations, are crucial, but we should not forget that they don't exist without the dedication, time, and energy of colleagues. We take a lot of time, plenty of the energy, to take in charge a huge amount of visible and invisible work to gather 1,500 sociologists here in Munjal University. And I would like to thank you all for welcoming me here, for maintaining a strong link, a strong cooperation between the ISS and the ISA, and even more, for showing us such dedication to come to a National Congress of Sociology. I met yesterday some students who travel for 45 hours by public transport just to reach this place. What a dedication. Well, I would like to tell them this is worth, because this is a Congress for me to learn from you, to listen to each other, but also to reassert that sociology matters, that we are committed for a more democratic, fairer, and fairer world, and therefore we have to learn from each other. So I would really like to thank you all for this Congress, this conference, and to congratulate the President of the ISS, my colleagues here from the university, to congratulate you for showing us all that ISS is a vibrant place for sociology in India, and that Indian sociology is a crucial part of global sociology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Players. Our chief guest for today, Ms. Urvashi Batalia, needs no introduction. Nevertheless, let me take this opportunity to introduce her. Ms. Batalia is an Indian feminist writer, publisher, and activist. She is known for her work in the women's movement of India, as well as for authoring books such as The Other Side of Silence, Voices from the Partition of India, and Speaking Peace, Women's Voices from Kashmir. She is a co-founder of Kali for Women, India's first feminist publishing house. In 2003, she founded Zuban Books. Ms. Batalia has also received the prestigious Padma Shri Award. I would now like to invite Ms. Batalia to deliver the keynote address.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Better, can you see me? This is a podium that is actually made for people of my size. Generally, they are not. Anyway, I want to ask you to start by taking a deep breath and focusing, because my 8 seconds are already over. And I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes, so it would be nice to have your attention. And I'm delighted to be here for your conference. You know, years ago, when I graduated from Delhi University, I was studying English literature. And by the time I finished my BA, I was a little fed up of Spencer and Milton, much though I loved them. But they had nothing to do with the life I was living in Jangpura in Delhi. and I wanted to switch to sociology. But at that time in Delhi University, it was impossible to make the switch because not only did the bureaucracy not allow it, but we were not allowed to think that disciplines could merge into each other or you could move from one to the other. So I have always been lurking at the borders of your discipline, and I am delighted to be here today with all of you to speak to you. And I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of the All India Sociological Conference, the Indian Sociological Society, and BM Munjal University for doing me this honor of inviting me to speak here. It's customary to begin a talk with some disclaimers, so here are mine. All of you are academics, and I'm a publisher, and I'm an occasional writer. In many ways, I stand outside of academia, and this is by choice. So I'm also a bit of an interloper here, which is why I'm doubly grateful to the organizers for thinking of someone who stands outside of the discipline. I'm not claiming this interloper status just to be cute, but really to alert you to the standpoint from where I will be speaking, which is from a space that lies between academia and activism, in particular feminist activism, and a space that is free of disciplinary boundaries, and which therefore takes in a little bit of everything. So it's not going to be an academic talk that I'm putting before you, and the title of the talk is The Researcher and the Researched, Questions for Our Times. What I want to talk about today is a set of concerns and questions that I've been grappling with as a researcher and writer, and as someone who is in the business of feminist knowledge production. My presentation will be fully anecdotal. I make no apologies for that. Stories are what animate my work. They are my inspiration, and it is stories I will tell here today. These stories raise issues of the kinds of dilemmas that we, as writers, both academic and otherwise, are confronted with today, which to my mind make our work both more daunting and more exciting. The stories also alert us as writers and researchers to what lies at the other end of the spectrum, which is inhabited by the subjects of our research. These spaces, that is the space of the researcher and the researched, have for the longest time been assumed to be quite separate. But over the years, this has been changing, and I would like here to explore both how they're changing and what that change means for us. Let me first explain what I mean by the separateness of these spaces. In somewhat simplistic terms, those who identify themselves as researchers are seen to occupy some kind of lofty, neutral, I put the word in quotes, and objective, I also put that in quotes, so some kind of lofty, neutral, and objective space where knowledge is generated and where theory is expounded. By contrast, the subjects of their research are generally seen as those inhabiting the realm of experience, which qualifies them as the field, and I put that word in quotes, on which the theory is based. Sorry, as I get old, I have to write down my talks and can't do what Maitri did, to speak without looking at a piece of paper. And somewhere these two areas get associated with power, that is the field and the theoretical realm. So one is the realm of the powerful, the other of the powerless. With power, money makes its presence felt. So those who with power usually have access to it and are assumed, interestingly, to deal with it fairly and with responsibility. And those without are generally poor and therefore are sometimes vulnerable to being corrupted by money. And this leads to the assumption that researchers must never pay their subjects. Because of the way power plays out in the world, and more specifically in the world of knowledge creation, these differences also fit into the assumption that the knowledge produced in the West or the global North comes to acquire more value and is seen as universal, while we here provide the specifics and the theory and practice separation gets played out all over again. Further categorizations follow. Because most academic fields are dominated by men, knowledge produced by them is superior, supposedly neutral, and therefore universal, even though it may be only about them. And that produced by women is somehow lacking because it is subjective, specific, and small, and it is only about them. It follows then that because academic fields are dominated by upper castes, knowledge produced by them is also superior, and that created by those on the ground, not so. And this goes on. This rather simple picture that I have drawn, and of course nothing is ever that simple, has, as I have mentioned, begun to change, and the impetus for that change comes from the ground up. I want particularly here to address the kind of change that has been brought about by feminist research. Previous speakers have referred to it, and the tools and methodologies it brings into the equation. What do I mean by feminist research? That will, I hope, emerge in the course of my presentation, but briefly, I mean research that comes out of feminist and women's movements, and that makes no pretense at neutrality, that is not an end in itself, but rather an intervention towards change and transformation, research whose methods are unorthodox, whose tools are different from the standard, research that does not take data as sacrosanct and brings in stories and lives, research that is collaborative, that is participatory, research whose methodologies and tools are evolving and adapting, and most importantly, research that asks difficult questions, both of existing forms of research and, most importantly, of itself. This kind of research, writing, or knowledge creation, especially where women are concerned, is relatively recent on our horizon. In academic terms, for example, it wasn't until women's studies made its appearance on the academic horizon in the mid-70s in India that we were even able to, within quotes, study women as such. The arrival of women's studies brought about a major change that has thus far remained, I think, relatively unnoticed. What women's studies established was that the public sphere, the world of men, was not the only legitimate area of research, but that the private, that which lay within the four walls of the home, was equally deserving of being studied. It also cautioned that the moment you cross the threshold into the home, the realities changed. For here, you met with a very different reality from what you saw in the outside world. Here, what you met were emotions, feelings, stories, connections, not dry, arid data. These are some of the assumptions I would like to explore in my talk. I want to do so by telling you 3 stories of 3 different feminist research and writing projects and looking at the questions that they raise. Let me begin with the story I know best, my own. A little over 30 years ago, I met, while researching a book I was writing on partition, a hijra called Mona Ahmed, who lived in a graveyard in the heart of Delhi. The bare bones of Mona's story are as follows. She was born a boy, or rather, in today's language, she was male assigned at birth. But from a young age, she believed quite strongly that she had been born in the wrong body, and when she was 18, she decided to take the first step to transition to the identity that she knew with a deep conviction was hers, even if her body told her otherwise. Mona thought, what is the body after all? Just an outwardly shell which can be subjected to the surgeon's scalpel and altered. In her mind, she had always known she was a woman, and therefore she had herself castrated and joined the hijras. At the time, SRS wasn't possible or legal, although Mona did go through a kind of SRS a bit later. A few days after we met, Mona surprised me by asking me if I would be interested in writing a book about her. I found the invitation both exciting and daunting, but also quite honestly a bit surprising. As researchers, when we approach human subjects for our research, it is not usually they who tell us what to do, but we who go with our expectations and assume that they will fit themselves into those. No matter how hard we tell ourselves otherwise, somewhere inside us we carry the assumption that the people we are talking to are our informants. I put that word in quotes, and it's a word I dislike intensely because it gives no agency to the people we are talking to. But we assume that they will, without questioning, accept the legitimacy of our mission and respond to our needs. That they will have needs, wants, and desires of their own is something we don't often consider. So when Mona turned to me and said, I've heard you're a writer, would you like to write my life? Part of my surprise came from because somewhere inside me, I too had carried that assumption. And her taking the initiative took a bit of that power of decision-making away from me, and I wasn't quite sure whether I liked it. By the time I met Mona, I was at the tail end of my research on partition and had begun to reflect on the mass of material I had gathered and was trying to make some sense of it. That research, conducted over more than a decade, led me to speak often at great length to people, especially women, and over time, many of them became my friends. The more so as the communication, initially one way when I was interviewing them, became more like a conversation and stories began to be shared. At the time, I was deeply involved in feminist activism, and my years of involvement in the women's movement had taught me a lesson I've carried with me all my life: the importance of listening, and especially of listening to women. Indeed, one of the most rewarding experiences of being involved in the women's movement in India was the listening groups we formed where women sat and shared their stories. I mention this also because the entanglement of the personal in your research lies at the very heart of feminist research. Mona and I began talking. Over the years, as we talked, our equation as two individuals engaged in the task of writing, one the writer, the other the subject, changed and transformed into a friendship, collapsing the distance that sometimes defines the writer-subject relationship. Instead of researcher and research, we became just two women talking together. Like all friends who cast themselves in the role of listeners, I found myself fascinated, but sometimes also skeptical and disbelieving of the things she said, and I wondered how I would write these into my narrative. I suspected, in fact I knew, she was trying to shape my narrative the way she wanted it, a story in which she was the victim. How was I to deal with this? My rational self told me a writer's skepticism towards her subject was permissible, part of her freedom of thought, speech, expression. My emotional self felt otherwise. I wanted to do right by Mona. I knew she was looking for sympathy, for understanding, and even perhaps a kind of justice. What or whose in the end would be the truth of my story? All of us will be familiar with this dilemma. When the researcher sets up an interaction with their subject, there is also a certain kind of expectation that accompanies that interaction. All too often, the expectation we carry in our heads is that which we want and expect, and as I said, we don't often think of the subject and what they may want. There were other questions that troubled me. I was writing a life. I was very clear from the start, as was Mona, that the work she wanted me to undertake was her individual story, not a collective story about the Hijra community. So it was life writing and not a study of the Hijra community. What were the resources then that I could draw on to write this individual life? Was such a life even within quotes worthy of being written about? Because so much life writing is about great lives. When you start to write a marginal life, rather than say a mainstream life, the materials you can draw on to build the picture are often scattered, ephemeral, thin on the ground. There are no papers housed in an archive or meticulously catalogued at home, no library resources or newspaper clippings, no letters carefully saved. Most time there isn't even a knowledgeable circle of friends and acquaintances whose memories and stories you can draw on. All you have is the person themselves. If you're lucky, their memories, perhaps objects, clothes, things they may have retained that can offer you some clues. As a writer then, I was faced with another dilemma: how to deal with the truth-telling required of writing a life when the archive itself, something that we depend on so much, was shifting, unpredictable, sometimes even elusive. Also, I asked myself a question again and again. Identity was at the heart of Mona's life and her dilemmas. She was a Hijra, a trans woman. Should it not then logically follow that sometimes someone from within her community should be writing about her, and not I, as I would be known today, a cis-het woman? I'm sure many of you will be familiar with this question. It comes back to haunt us all the time. Can only write about like? I have no answer for it, and it still lives inside my mind. Let me now turn to my second story that picks on some of the points I have mentioned here above. Before I do, though, I want to come back to a point I had made earlier. It's one that as researchers we often shy away from. Simply put, it is this: we have long carried an assumption that if we pay the subjects of our research, the relationship somehow becomes impure. I'm not entirely sure where this comes from. But while I was working with Mona, there were any number of occasions on which I was asked to speak about her. The story was a sexy one after all. I struggled with this dilemma because every time I spoke, I got paid. Should I not have paid her? Because somehow the purity of my relationship with the person who was paying me was a given, but the purity of Mona's and my relationship, if I passed that payment on, was not something that would be considered. Does purity work only in one direction? Why do we as researchers shy away from this question? Our time is paid, our travel is paid, our writings benefit us, whether in academic terms or otherwise, but we do not want to pay the subjects we work with. I'll leave this question with you and turn to my second story. This story has to do with a book on queerness in India published some years ago. The author, a well-known Indian academic based outside of the country, but with strong links in India, came to India to do her research. She met and spoke with queer groups in India and spent time with them. In one particular group, she spent time in their offices and also accessed their archive and interviewed people, all with their permission and consent. When the book came out, however, this group was unhappy and they wrote an open letter to the author, which was shared in a feminist network in India. The letter, while appreciating the author's work generally, raised some ethical and methodological questions about her research, in particular about her interaction with the group. The group pointed to a lack of proper trust building, irregular communication, an extractive attitude to seeking information, and erratic, brief, and informal interactions with members of the group. They asked, and I quote, "What does this involvement show in terms of feminist ethnographic research? From our understanding of feminist research, trust and continuous engagement are necessary for ethnographic work and during times and ways that suit both the researchers and the participants. It was only expected that we would be consulted and argued with at every step of the research process." They listed several things that they felt were not respectful of their role. The research proposal had not been shared with them, nor were the transcripts of the interviews, and they felt as if they had been reduced to data. And they pointed to the need for consent and trust building as needed at every phase of feminist ethnographic research. They said that the way the academic conducted her research made them feel that they were case study subjects of the third world for an international academic. They asked, is the activist space only worthy of being used as experiential evidence of intellectualized arguments and hypotheses? Why was this so? Especially when academic and feminist academic research is trying to find newer methodologies and research areas where we do not study down. That is an important phrase. The members raised different but related questions to the questions that I have raised above with my work with Mona. Were they not owed the respect of being seen as partners in research and not merely its subjects? So the question is, can research therefore ever be a partnership? Does the idea of a research as a partnership provide us with a new way of thinking about the process of knowledge creation? After all, they said they were thinking beings with agency and they deserved to be taken seriously. And did the writer not have an obligation to keep them in the loop at all times, to stay in touch with them, to share their findings with them? One of the key points was they felt the research had been extractive and they had been reduced to data. This, they felt, was an insult. Until feminist research methodologies began to question existing methods of research and the tools they relied on, data was considered sacrosanct, something that gave your research meaning and weight. And the human being that lay at the end of that data stream was reduced to a number or a nameless statistic, or indeed just an anecdote. This method of research has now been replaced with a much more real, nuanced, and complex research that engages with the realities of human beings. And it would not be wrong to say that the major impetus for this change has come because of feminist interventions in research. One of the results of this is that the subjects of our research are no longer mute, silent, voiceless beings. They are not willing to be subjected to extractive practices. They are not willing to be talked down to, nor are they willing to be seen merely as informants or respondents. This group did not want to be reduced to data. Instead, they demanded that the writer engage with them. Let me now take you to my final story, that of a book co-authored by 9 women across 2 continents that offers some possible ways of addressing the questions that I'm raising. The book, originally in Hindi, appeared in English under the title Playing with Fire and came about through a collective process of sharing intimate personal stories within a supportive group of women. 9 women, 7 of them poor, laboring women of different castes from Sitapur district in Uttar Pradesh, and 2 urban women, one an NGO worker and the other an academic from the US, came together to create this book. It was in collective discussions between the researcher and the researched that a method was identified which would keep the stories of the women in their own voices over a period of time. The women met and told each other about their lives. They chose to read, write together, and share their individual stories in the form of diaries. The 2 academic writers then undertook to write the stories into a compiled and collective narrative. The women spoke of the process thus, and I quote, "When we were preparing ourselves to write this book, we felt a sense of adventure creeping into our bones. Would this world be able to see us, formerly uneducated women, as writers? Would it give us the same respect and wisdom that it accords to all its upper caste and elite scholars and thinkers? Would our teachers, would our readers be able to value the courage and trust with which we have pointed out our most cherished and intimate moments, our deepest sorrows and wounds of humiliations, and everything sweet and bitter that we have encountered in our lives?" End of the quote. In the book that they wrote, the village women asked certain key questions which resonate strongly with the questions raised by the group I mentioned above. They asked, what is the difference between social empowerment and intellectual empowerment? Are they not 2 sides of the same coin? The women's work was grassroots organizing. The work of the 2 city women was to put together the book that came out of their experiences. So how do we then frame intellectual labor and activist grassroots organizing? Why should one be on a higher plane than the other? Who becomes the subject of knowledge and who its purveyor? Does knowledge and expertise only exist in the academy, in places of power, or does it also exist in the minds, hearts, and daily lives of the powerless? The women involved in this collaborative research project worked together for over 2 years, sharing their stories, confronting their fears and prejudices, facing their families, and working together to write their book. In the process of the sharing, they understood themselves better. They understood, for example, that while poverty may be an overarching phenomenon that united them, the ways in which it played out in the life of Dalit women among them was very different from the ways in which it played out in other lives. 1/3 of Sitapur's population is Dalit. Caste was present in every interaction between the writers. The women saw it, they talked about it. By all accounts, the conversations were not easy, but the important thing is that they took place at all. At the heart of these interactions lay an important question, one that we need to grapple with, and it is this: can collaborative research and knowledge production be imagined across borders of caste, class, region, and geography? The women describe how they wanted to question the assumption that knowledge is only that which is created in the academy or by outsiders. Why can't we tell our own stories? And the question they asked was, what would happen if our stories could replace Rani Ki Jhansi in our school textbooks? What indeed? So I'd like now to bring the threads of what I'm saying together and to ask ourselves, you and me, some questions. What is the transformative potential of these new methods of research, and should we be grappling with them? The academy in which we work is changing. No longer is objectivity the holy grail. No longer is a questionnaire adequate. No longer are the subjects of our research passive. But it's not only research and its scope that are changing, but also the empirical base on which much research is based. Given this, how must we think of our research differently? What are our responsibilities as researchers, not only to ourselves, but to the subject, the territory, the people we are talking about? These are questions we ask ourselves constantly as feminist publishers. We see ourselves as being engaged in the task of knowledge production and sharing, but how can we bring greater accountability to our work? The writers of this book tell us that such a notion of accountability, and I quote them, is based on the idea that knowledge must emerge out of sustained critical dialogues with those who are the subjects of that knowledge. In this way, they say, the subjects of that knowledge become its primary evaluators, its critics, but also intellectual partners of those who are seen as experts, and even something as rarefied as theory can become collectively produced. You know, long ago, Gayatri Spivak asked this question that we are all familiar with: can the subaltern speak? I think that question is incomplete without all of us asking its corollary, which is, but is there anyone to listen? The real issue, I think, wasn't that the subaltern was not speaking. Rather, it was that her speech was not comprehensible to the researcher, and the researcher was unwilling and unable to listen. Today, researchers, the subjects of their research, are saying, no, we will not play the role you expect us to and legitimize your career. We'll speak for ourselves. I find that so exciting. I'm not here offering you any answers to the questions that I've raised here, but I am asking that we, all of us, researchers, writers, think of research differently, not as something we do to others, but as something we do with others, and without these others, our research would be meaningless. Let me end this talk. What I wanted to say to you, the serious stuff is over. And I thought I might tell you just a little story to lighten the mood, which comes from this book and from the village women of Sitapur district. And it's a story that many of us may be familiar with in one form or the other. And it goes like this, that there is a researcher who arrives in a village to do research. The researcher is a man. He comes from the West. So these stereotypes hold. When he gets close to the village, he sees that there is a water body to be crossed in order to get to the village. So there is a boatman hanging about with a boat, and he hires the boat to cross over into the village. And while he's sitting in the boat, he thinks, why don't I start my research right now? I have a subject in front of me. And so he says to the boatman, have you heard of capitalism? And the boatman says, no, what's that? I don't know what that's about. So then he says, oh my God, you don't know this important international development? Then a quarter of your life is over. A little later, the boatman then is silent. He doesn't know what to do. And a little later, the researcher says to him, have you heard of Marxism? And he says, no, what is that? I don't know what that is. And the researcher says, oh my God, this was such a great man, you don't know about him? Well, half your life is lost because you don't know this. A little later then, the poor boatman is silent. A little later then, he asks him, have you heard of feminism? And the boatman says, no, what is that? And he says, oh my God, you don't know what women are doing in the world? 3/4 of your life is over. Then a little wave hits the boat and the boat overturns and they both fall into the water, at which point the boatman says to the researcher, do you know how to swim? And the researcher obviously says no, and the boatman says, then your whole life is over. So I think, thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Ms. Butalia. Now we will present the Lifetime Achievement Award. I would like to invite Professor Tiplut Nongbri to the stage. I request Professor Sudha Khokate to join us on stage and read the citation.
It's an honor to read the citation of my teacher, Professor Tiplut Nombri for the Lifetime Achievement Award 2024. Born in Meghalaya, Professor Tiplut Nombri has had an illustrious career in postgraduate teaching, research, administration, and supervision of MPhil, PhD, and postdoctoral research in the field of sociology for more than 35 years. After completing her MA and PhD in sociology from Delhi School of Economics and PhD in sociology from Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi, Professor Nombri joined as the faculty in the Department of Sociology, Center for the Study of Social System, Social Science, JNU in October 1986. In December 2003, she joined the Department of Sociology in Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, Meghalaya, as a professor of sociology. In January 2005, she returned to CSS, SSS, JNU till January 2017. In 2017, she was invited to head the Dr. Saifuddin Kitlu Chair at the Center for Northeastern Studies and Policy Research, Jamia Millia Islamia, a position she held till 2021. Professor Nombri has held several key administrative and honorary positions at different points during her services. Besides being chairperson of the center at the JNU from 2007 to 2009, she was the founding director of the Northeastern India Studies Program. She has been awarded UGC Junior Research Fellowship, UGC Postdoctoral Fellowship, Research Associateship, Indian Overseas Fellowship, British Council Commonwealth Fellow on Gender and Development, and Teen Murthy Senior Fellow. She has been associated with many Indian universities and research institutions as a member of the Advisory Committee, Governing Body, Research Committee, Board of Studies, and a visiting fellow. She spent a year at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, UK, as a study fellow. Over the years, she has visited universities, institutes in Sweden, Denmark, Thailand, Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, USA at the University of California and Appalachian Study Center, then University of Kentucky. She was at the People's Republic of China for faculty interaction at Yunnan Academy of Social Sciences and at Tianjin University, and field work at Lijiang and Lushi village in Yunnan province, sponsored by the Ford Foundation. In 2012, she was a visiting professor at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. Currently, she was a visiting professor at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, and she's the president of Lakintu College, Shillong, an institution established to provide education to students from deprived and marginalized segment of society. Her work primarily focuses on ethnicity, family, kinship, tribal development, gender studies, and environmental issues. She has published articles in reputed journals and has authored and edited several books individually as well as jointly with other scholars. These include Materiality and Visuality in Northeastern India, an Interdisciplinary Perspective, Springer, published in 2021, Migration, Identity and Conflict, Lived Experiences of Northeasterners in Delhi by Rawat Publications in 2017, Development, Masculinity and Christianity, Essays and Verses from India's Northeastern Shimla Indian Institute of Advanced Studies 2014, Gender, Matrimony and Entrepreneurship, Zuban 2008, Development, Ethnicity and Gender, Selected Essays on Tribes in India by Rawat Publications in 2003, and Tribal Demography and Development in Northeastern India, co-edited with Ashish Bose and Nikhilesh Kumar, BR Publication Corporations in 1990. The Indian Sociological Society is honored to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Professor Tiplut Nombri in appreciation and recognition for her commendable service, accomplishments, and contributions to the discipline and the profession of sociology.
Respected President, Professor Maitri Chowdhury, and your team at ISS, Honorable Dr. Urvashi Butalia, Professor Menand, Professor Geoffrey Players, distinguished colleagues, students and friends. I feel deeply honored and humbled to receive this prestigious award. Thank you so very much for this recognition, which, seriously speaking, I feel I do not deserve it. But nonetheless, I accept it with humility, not only for what it meant to me personally, but more so for what it meant to the cause I'm committed to, that is, to take Northeast India studies to the center stage of social research. As many of you would be aware, Northeast India is not only geographically, also politically and socially at the periphery of this country, and has also been a long neglected area in sociology, for which calls for concerted effort to reverse this process. At the same time, I would like to admit that by giving me this award, I think this reflects a changing attitude of sociologists to the region. The credit for this goes basically to the large number of young scholars who in recent times have ventured to carry on research not only on, but also in Northeast India. I owe much of my own research on the region to these scholars whose enthusiasm acted as a stimulus to me. My special thanks to all of them. I would also like to place on record my sincere thanks to a number of people who in one way or another contributed to my receiving this award. Many of them, unbeknown to them, I have liberally borrowed from the store of knowledge to make sense of the problems I studied. The number is large. I'll not be able to mention all of them, but I'll take the liberty, with the chair's permission, to mention some of them. Foremost among these are Professors Leela Dubé and Patricia Oberoi, whose monumental works on gender and kinship provided the impetus for my works on gender and maternity. Fieldwork in China's Yunnan province with Patricia was particularly a rewarding experience. It gave me a chance to learn firsthand from the master itself about the value of methodological and theoretical rigor. Professor B.K. Roy Berman, the so-called Gandhian, was instrumental in stimulating my interest in the study of tribes and indigenous peoples, policy issues, development, and ethnicity. Professor P.S. Ramakrishnan of the School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, for rousing my interest in environmental issues at a time when environmental issues had not yet received the interest of sociologists, which led to the introduction of a course, Ecology and Society, which are offered to the MA students at GNU. On the other hand, I would also like to pay my tribute to my senior professor at GNU, Professor T.K. Oman, whose illustrious works on diverse sociological issues and his tacit belief in the theoretical efficacy of sociology from below as against sociology from above aided me to find my own foothold in sociology. Thanks are also due to my teachers at the Department of Sociology, Delhi School of Economics, for providing me with the intellectual base which helped me to enter the profession. Last but not the least, I would be failing in my duty if I do not mention the valuable contribution of generations of students I taught and mentored, some of whom have closely collaborated with me in some of my projects, one of whom escorted me this morning to this conference, and she's sitting there right in front of me, Rashi Bhargav. The critical discussions that the students raise in the classroom and the queries which they raise on various occasions not only continuously challenge me to work extra hard, but also enrich my perspective. To them all, I dedicate this award. Thank you, Kublai. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Professor Nongri and Professor Kokate. I would like to invite Professor G. Satyanarayan to the stage. I request Professor Balaji Kendre to join us on stage and read the citation.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, President Ma'am and all dignitaries and dear colleagues. I feel honored and privileged to read the citation for the Life Achievement Award 2024 for Professor Gattu Satyanarayana. Professor Gattu Satyanarayana, Professor Emeritus, Usmania University, and former Principal, University College of Arts and Social Sciences, Usmania University, was born on 1st January 1950, as per the school records, in Ghanpur Station, erstwhile Warangal district of Telangana state, in a small farmer family of Gaud community. As a graduate of commerce in 1973 and pressed with financial problems, he went to Hyderabad in search of a job. In the process, he came to know about the admission notification for LLB and PG courses of Usmania University. He joined sociology, which was a turning point in his pursuit of academic career and life. His concern for societal issues and his training in sociology changed his view of lifetime from self-orientation to engagement with larger questions of social justice. His research spans across a wide range of subjects, agrarian studies, sociology of education, development studies, social movements, tribal development, and sociology of women. His books include Changing Agrarian Structure and Labor Relations in 1992, Development, Displacement and Rehabilitation in 1999, Voluntary Efforts and Rural Development in 2007. Along with this, he also published Women in Grassroots Governance in 2020, and Agrarian Crisis and Farmers' Suicides has just been published in 2024. He has also published 23 research papers in national journals of repute. Apart from his focus on agrarian relations and development, he has written on the problems of Muslim women, Dalits, and prevention of crime among the youth. He has consistently written in national dailies, highlighting the concerns of marginalized, and it is also noteworthy that more than half of these writings were written in Telugu, in his mother tongue. In his distinguished career as a teacher and researcher, he has completed 10 major and minor research projects, mentored 9 MPhil students, and successfully guided 12 PhD students. We have worked on subjects as diverse as health issues of men, women, and children, and myths and patterns of belief in rural areas in that context. Currently, he has been directing many research projects, and in addition to that, Professor Satyanarayana has served as a adjudicator of many PhD theses and has acted as a member of selection committees recommending candidates for teaching posts of different universities across India. Professor Satyanarayana was awarded the Emeritus Fellowship by UGC twice, first in 2013 and second in 2017. Professor Satyanarayana is associated with prestigious professional bodies like International Sociological Association, Indian Sociological Society, Andhra Pradesh Sociological Society, among others. He has served as a member of editorial board of Sociological Bulletin, Indian Ocean Digest, Journal of Andhra Pradesh Sociological Society, and has also held administrative positions in Osmania University. Rajya Sainik Board, he was also member of Rajya Sainik Board. He has participated in many international conferences, including Germany, in the countries Germany, Sweden, South Africa, Austria, Spain, Japan, and Canada, to name few. Among his many outreach activities, Professor Satyanarayana had been a member of the Minimum Wage Advisory Board, Government of Andhra Pradesh, and the Sainik Welfare Board, Government of Andhra Pradesh. The Indian Sociological Society is honored to present the Lifetime Achievement Award to Professor G. Satyanarayana in appreciation and recognition of his lifelong commitment to the discipline and profession.
Respected President, Madam Swati Munjal, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shyam Menon, Dean Professor Aravindan Banerjee, Organizing Secretary Susmita Chattopadhyaya, Registrar BMU Sunit Soni, President ISS, very efficient and intellectual President of the day for ISS, Maitri Chaudhary, President ISS, Professor Geoffrey Players, Chief Guest, Srimati Urvasi Butalia, Secretary ISS Dynamic, Professor Sweta Prasad, distinguished professors, scholars, students, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to be before you all and share my gratitude to the fraternity of sociology, especially our beloved President, ISS, and Secretary, Professor Sweta Prasad. And Professor Vivek, Treasurer, is my best friend, and many other executive members of the MC, Ajaylu Numai, Balaji Kendre, Gayatri Bhattacharya, Ramesh Makwana, Bibi Malik, Dilip Kairnar, and other esteemed executive members of the ISS who are responsible for this, giving me the award. And as I really, when they proposed me that, I felt very internally little bit emotional. I may not deserve, but certainly their insistence I obliged and accepted with humility, because there are many scholars eminent more than me, and they have contributed a lot. But for the reason I accepted is my sincere approach to the profession and my teaching and research and training the students. And this credit, if at all I am deserving, and awarded by Professor Maitreyi Chowdhury and our secretary and members of the executive. Most of them are my close friends. They saw me, my approach and my understanding and contribution to the society and to the fraternity of sociology. And this credit first goes to my parent university, Usman University, which has given me opportunity to grow and pursue the career of sociology. Particularly my teachers who inspired me and brought me to this level is no more. Professor Hasan Askari, Professor Ratan Shah, great teachers. We came from the village. With a humble background. They inspired us and they encouraged us, promoted us, and to bring to this level. Professor Lakshmana, Professor Vishwanathan, Professor J.V. Raghavendra Rao, who actually inspired and encouraged, helped to build up this career, whose intellectual inspiration and their passion for teaching, research, and way of life, they imbibed and inspired us, me to be honest in the pursuit of academic profession, teaching, research, and which I maintained in all walks of life. If at all I deserve this honor, the credit also goes to my teachers first and scholars, students who have been with me all these 30, 40 years, and to my family members who always behind me in all these endeavors. This award may be the result of sheer hard work, I believe, and sincere pursuit of profession with a perspective of social justice and development of all sections. And I believed to reach higher goals in life, one need not be brilliant and belong to rich class, but one needs to be inherently honest and hardworking in a chosen field of interest. One day the dark will be dispelled. At the end, I especially thank Professor Parthanath Mukherjee. I think under his leadership, this Best Lifetime Achievement Award is instituted. And he was also a teacher who has taken a perspective stand in life, all his research and teaching. And he was actually always upright and promoting the cause of righteousness and all sections of the people, all levels. And I was inspired by with his professional convictions, with passion and honesty, upholding the truth. And I am really inspired by intellectual pursuit of profession. I once again thank one and all, especially our President ISS, Maitreyi Chaudhary, Secretary, Treasurer, members of all executive, and all the members of the ISS. At the end, I thank this Munjal University, which has given me this opportunity to be before all of you. And thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Satyanarayan and Professor Kendre. We will now present the M.N. Srinivas Memorial Prize. I would like to call upon Professor Tulsi Patel to speak a few words about the M.N. Srinivas Memorial Prize and announce the prizes. Professor Patel will be joining us online.
Am I audible? Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Professor Patel.
Okay, thanks so much for asking me to speak about the prize and the memorial lecture. This is part of what is called the endowment, M.N. Srinivas Endowment Fund with the ISS. So, Honorable President of Indian Sociological Society, Secretary, the organizers, the Vice Chancellor of the Munjal University, and the President of the World Sociology Association, and dignitaries including Dr. Urvashi Butalia and others on the stage. Because there's some electricity issue, so I don't have the list of these dignitaries with their names at the moment. So please excuse me for that. But I'm indeed honored to speak about the M.N. Srinivas Endowment Fund. A bit of that came to me from various writings and conversations with people who were important and instrumental in instituting this fund with the Indian Sociological Society. The two things that this endowment fund with ISS does is to organize a memorial lecture in the honor of M.N. Srinivas and to give away the Young Sociologist Essay Prize, M.N. Srinivas Endowment Fund's Essay Prize to a young scholar. The idea of speaking before you today actually came from suggestions made by Professor Maitreyi Chaudhary and Professor Shweta Prasad, among others, when we were having an endowment meeting on Zoom at the end of September this year. When I spoke to the executive members on the committee and the Indian Sociological Society during the meeting, they came with this idea that I should speak to all of you about how this endowment fund came about, because they thought that this is an information that must be recounted for the senior members and for many of the junior scholars who are, young scholars who are now sitting here and are members of the society. As the membership is really growing fast of young scholars, they should know what really happened. So I thought I'll recount the history of this endowment fund. This is after Srinivas had left Delhi's department, founding it in 58-59. He left for Bangalore in 72. And it was after he left that the idea of having a Festschrift volume in his honor was thought about by his former students at the Department of Sociology, Delhi School of Economics, and later colleagues, A.M. Shah, B.S. Paviskar, and E.A. Ramaswamy. The three of them decided to bring out a Festschrift volume in the honor of M.N. Srinivas. And this is also the time when it was the period of snail mail and no digitalized communication as today. They sent out letters for call for essays, and the response was enormously overwhelming. So rather than one fellowship volume, there were 5 fellowship volumes that came about, though it took a very, very long time to bring out those volumes. And the names of those volumes can be got from the society website or from other places, but they were largely covering theory and method and evaluation of the work of M.N. Srinivas, women in Indian society, complex organizations in urban communities, development and ethnicity, religion and kinship. And these were published by SAGE in the 1990s. And the interesting part of the story is that the royalties on these 5 volumes, when this was paid to the editors by SAGE, which published these volumes, the 3 editors decided that this money that came in terms of royalties should be given to the Indian Sociological Society, and a fund should be established in the honor of M.N. Srinivas. So, M.N. Srinivas Endowment Fund was set up at the Indian Sociological Society, and a bank account that was only for the royalties. It was instructed that every year the royalties came, they should be transferred to the Indian Sociological Society, to this fund. So the Indian Sociological Society is organizing and managing this fund till now, and that has very responsibly and conscientiously maintained its records in the ISS office. And what is also interesting is that ICSSR, the Indian Council for Social Science Research, contributed a matching grant to the fund, and the society was able to conduct its 2 jobs. One was organizing a memorial lecture by a reputed scholar, and the other is to give away a prize to a young scholar who is a member of the Indian Sociological Society and has published the paper. Now, published papers are invited every year by young scholars, and these papers are assessed by a team, and a prize is given. And one of the senior members of the society that was part of the endowment fund committee once said, because there were members who said there is too little money in the prize. And the members said, it doesn't matter, it's the name that matters. If you get a M.N. Srinivas Endowment Fund essay prize, that's more important than the amount that is given. So this was part of the story that goes into the context of what this endowment fund has been doing. And it was important for M.N. Srinivas and the editors that young scholars should be encouraged. So rather than just having a memorial lecture, a prize based on published essays was constituted, and that goes on till now. And today the prize is going to Dr. Neelam Chetri of IIT Mandi, Himachal Pradesh, and Dr. Bani Shikha Ghosh of this University of Sunderland, London, UK. And I really congratulate both the scholars. Their papers are really excellent. And I must also at the same time mention that it was very difficult for the committee to decide who should be given the prize this year. Most of the essays were really good, and it was tough to decide who should get the prize. And at the end, 2 scholars are going to share the prize today. And I congratulate them, and I give over to the president of the society to take on from here. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and I'm happy to have related this to you all. Thank you so much.
Can we have Dr. Banishika Ghosh and Dr. Nilambar Chetri up on the stage, please? Thank you, Professor Patel. Now, I would like to call upon Professor Abha Chauhan and Professor B.K. Nagla to release the ISS volume.
Sabhi ko namaskar. A very good morning to all of you. I would just like to say that the Hindi Journal of Indian Sociological Society, Bharatiya Samasha Samiksha, the articles published in that journal are now being brought out in the form of books. So there are 7 books, 7 volumes rather, and 4 of these have been released during the last conference at Vellore Institute of Technology. The 3 of them are being released now, but altogether we have 7 books, and I thank Indian Sociological Society for giving this space to us to release these volumes. I would just say that these are, like for example, Kamzor Varg Ka Samaj Shastra, edited by Professor Vivek Kumar, Karl Marx, Ek Samaj Shastri Drishti, Professor Paramjit Singh Judge, Mahatma Gandhi एवं अहिंसा का समाजशास्त्र, Professor Rajiv Gupta, Bharatiya Samaj Shastra, Professor Anand Kumar, Dr. Ashish Kumar. And these were the 4 volumes that were released, and the 3 are now Bharatiya Samaj Shastriyon ke Saath Samvad, edited by Professor B.K. Nagla, Bharatiya Samaj Shastri Gatishilta, edited by Dr. Ashish Kumar, Samaj Shastr Yatharth, uske Samaj Shastriya Narrative, edited by Naresh Bhargar and Dr. Jyoti Sadana. So these are the books actually compiled and published by Rawat Publications, and I'm really thankful to the publisher for doing this, and also thank Professor Nagla, who has been actually inspirational behind getting these books published. So this is an ISS initiative of getting the books published in Hindi on the basis of our Hindi journal, Bharatiya Samasha Samiksha, which is actually published by SAGE. Thank you so much. Professor Nagla, if you, actually he is the person who's instrumental in doing so. Professor Nagla, if you.
Distinguished scholars, fellow friends and young students. Actually, the idea came to me when I was editing the journal associated by Rajiv Gupta, Ashish Kumar, and Naresh Bhargav. So I proposed this idea to the then President Paramjit Singh was there, and MC, they decided to publish it. But it materialized when ISS President Abha Chauhan was the president the last time. So she also agreed, and we published, and we approached to the Rawat publication. These volumes are still, they are available in the stall also. And for the larger circulation, we thought of it for the Hindi readers. This is good to bring in the form of the book, so that's why we have brought in this thing. So I thank, and again, these 4 volumes last time, they were released at Vellore, and 3 volumes recently released. And I again requested Professor Maitri Chaudhary and Shweta for releasing these volumes, so they agreed it. So this is the chance. So I'm thankful to all President, Secretary, and MC members. They have agreed to publish it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chauhan and Professor Nagla. I would now like to invite Professor Shweta Prasad, the Secretary of the Indian Sociological Society, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Good morning to all. I think it's good morning. Yeah, it is good morning. Good morning to all. Respected Chief Guest, Ms. Urvashi Butalia, esteemed President, Indian Sociological Society, Professor Maitri Chaudhary, Professor Geoffrey Players, President of International Sociological Association, Professor S.B. Menon, Vice Chancellor of BMU, Professor Arindam Banerjee, Dean School of Liberal Studies, BMU, Dr. Suchismita and Dr. Manu Matthew, Organizing Secretaries of the 49th All India Sociological Conference, Dr. Sunit Soni, Registrar, BMU, MC members and RCAG conveners present in the audience, all the dignitaries, participants, and delegates present here, Professor Tulsi Patel, who has joined us online. It is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the Indian Sociological Society for the inaugural session of the 49th All India Sociological Conference. First and foremost, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our chief guest, Padam Shri Ms. Urvashi Butalia, for delivering a thought-provoking keynote address. Ma'am, you beautifully highlighted the various intersections of power and marginalities, besides dilemmas that women face, and various questions also were raised throughout your lectures, setting the tone for the conference. I express my gratitude to Professor Menon, Vice Chancellor, BMU, for inaugurating the conference. I'm grateful to Professor Arindam Banerjee, Dean School of Liberal Studies, for his remarks and welcome address, and Dr. Sunit Soni, Registrar, BMU, for her gracious felicitation that added a special touch to this event. My heartfelt appreciation goes to Professor Maitri Chaudhary for her visionary address, and throughout her lecture, she has been talking about the importance of sociology, how it changes with the change in context, consciousness, and its relations to the theme of the conference, to the development and democracies, and also the challenges of our time. So thank you very much, ma'am, and I agree totally that yes, sociology matters. And Professor Geoffrey Players, you also repeated the word sociology matters. So I also thank you for delivering your address and sharing valuable insights. In fact, you highlighted and you informed us, many of us might not be knowing, that the role Indian Sociological Society and Indian sociologists have been playing at the international level and in the growth of International Sociological Association and to the global sociology. Thank you for these information which young people might find interesting and they might be proud of, they should be proud of. The information and the role that Indian Sociological Society is playing globally. And moving forward, I would like to thank Professor Tulsi Patel for sharing details about M.N. Srinivas Endowment Funds. We'll be sharing little about this maybe during GBM session. Moving forward, a special moment of this event was the presentation of Lifetime Achievement Award. I congratulate both the recipients of Lifetime Achievement Award, Professor Tiplut Nongpri and Professor Gattu Satyanarayan. I also would like to thank the recipients of M.N. Srinivas Essay Competition Prize, Dr. Ghosh and Dr. Chetri from IIT Mandi. So I congratulate you both. My gratitude extends to the editorial team behind the ISS volume Book of Souvenirs, which is there in your tag which you are wearing. You just have to scan and you'll get the volume there. So the entire team, credit goes to the team, and I congratulate and thank them all. I lastly thank the organizing secretaries, Dr. Suchasmita Chattopadhyay and Dr. Manu Matthew and their entire team for tireless efforts in meticulously planning and executing this mega event. Yes, it is a mega event because with the participation of nearly 1,500 participants, it is a mega event. A special thanks to all the seniors. I know there are dignitaries sitting in the dais, many vice chancellors and many bureaucrats are here. So a special thanks to them, a special thank to all the delegates, to speakers, to volunteers for their enthusiastic participation and ensuring the success of this conference. Their participation ensures success of the conference. I'm really happy and thankful to the young lot who are here. I could see all of you sitting there. The seats obviously are full. And as informed by Professor Maitri Chaudhary, we have another hall also where this inaugural session is being live telecasted. So thank you to all of you. Keep participating. Your participation matters as much as sociology matters. So I would also like to congratulate Professor Abha Chauhan and Professor Nagla for the release of their 3 volumes. 4 were already released, 3 volumes that have been released now. So thank you all for your presence and participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Prasad. We will conclude the inaugural session with National Anthem. I kindly request everyone to rise up for the National Anthem. Thank you.
Hello.
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 Sure.
Hello. Hello. भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंग तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे जय.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We have 3 exciting days packed ahead of us with multiple plenary sessions and special lectures. We look forward to engaging discussions and hope this conference will enrich our collective understanding of the contemporary sociological issues. For further details, please scan the QR code provided to you in your kit. We will continue and meet here again for the plenary 1 session after 15 minutes of tea break. So tea will be available inside E2 cafeteria and outside. People who would like to have tea without sugar, please move to cafeteria E2, inside E2. Thank you. We'll see you around.